7 people have lost their lives in a tragic plane crash in North Carolina. Among those who perished was NASCAR legend Greg Biffle. We're joined by CBN editor and host of the popular NASCAR YouTube channel, Danny B Talks, Daniel Baldwin. So, Danny, how has this loss impacted the NASCAR fan base, and what do we know about what happened yesterday?
Well, Raj, it's been a very, very sad 24 hours. A lot of people in the NASCAR industry, NASCAR fans, and NASCAR themselves have all just had time over the last 24 hours to reflect on what a driver that Greg Biffle was and what a person that he was. And ultimately, it's incredibly sad to see not just Greg, but the whole Biffle family, his wife and 2 children, who perished in this tragic plane crash in Statesville, North Carolina yesterday. Greg is someone that I remember racing as a young NASCAR fan as a kid. He first started in the ranks of the Truck Series back in the late 90s and early 2000s. He rose up the ranks with the people over at Roush Fenway Racing, now Roush Fenway Kozlowski Racing these days. And they have all reached out and said their condolences to Greg and everyone who was associated with that flight. Just an incredible person in the garage area that cannot be replaced, and ultimately just a true tragedy. We've seen so many plane crashes this year, and everyone within the CBN News organization has had so many of these stories that have come up just in this last year alone, starting off of what happened in Washington, D.C. to start the year. Then not long after that, the crash in Philadelphia. Recently, the tragic UPS crash in Louisville. And when this one came in, it was like, dang, another one. But then from my side of things, as someone who has spent a lot of time covering the sport of NASCAR, I started getting some text messages and alerts that this is where this was in Statesville, North Carolina, very close to where a lot of NASCAR industry people are, near Charlotte, North Carolina area. It became very clear very fast something was wrong, and that the plane was owned by Greg Biffle. That's when fear struck a lot of people in the NASCAR industry, and ultimately it was sadly kind of confirmed shortly after that from Cletus McFarland, who is a popular YouTube creator, and he's also a rising driver in the NASCAR's Arca Menard series, who was very close friends with Greg Biffle, that Greg and his family were on their way to Bradenton, Florida for an event happening at his Freedom Factory racetrack. And the news kind of all cycled itself together, and we found out that sadly we had lost Greg Biffle. It's just a tragedy, man, just a tragedy.
Well, Danny, when Greg finally stopped his racing days, he became known more for his humanitarian work. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so Greg officially stopped racing full-time after the 2016 season. He was racing the 16 car for Roush Fenway Racing back then, and his reason for stepping away was more competition-driven. Ultimately, if they weren't going to be up to the standard he wanted to be at to win, he just wanted to take a break from it, and he did ultimately, but he did come back. He ran a couple of races for Kyle Busch Motorsports, and he actually ended up winning his first race back in 2019 for Kyle Busch Motorsports. That was fun to see him return and get a win. But then he ran a handful of races for a new Cup Series team in 2022 and kind of helped give them a little bit of a veteran driver to start off with. And that led to him also racing in an organization called the Superstar Racing Experience. It was good to see Greg kind of step back into the racing spotlight. But ultimately, Raj, I think he is going to be remembered most for what he did outside of a race car. After Hurricane Helene hit the greater North Carolina area, Greg took it upon himself to use the resources he had. He was a licensed pilot, and he owned a private helicopter. He took that helicopter and he went into rural North Carolina in some of the areas that were cut off from the flooding, and he performed rescue operations. He did supply drops. He did whatever he could, and he inspired a few other wealthy individuals from North Carolina to do the same. And that was a true testament to the kind of person that Greg truly was, and ultimately why we are just incredibly sad to have lost Greg Biffle.
Well, Danny, The crash was, became publicized, I guess you could say, because of his death. But as you were mentioning, that there was more than just him on board. Maybe can you let us know a little bit more details on who else was on board and any other final thoughts you might have?
Yeah, so the official statement was put out by NASCAR yesterday, and they did confirm the identities of 7 fatalities on board the crash. You, of course, had Greg Biffle, his wife, Christina, and their 2 children, Emma and Ryder. And also, there was Craig Wadsworth, who was a longtime hauler and motor coach driver, longtime NASCAR driver. Kenny Wallace, brother of Rusty Wallace. People might be more familiar with his brother Rusty. He spoke a lot on his relationship with Craig yesterday on Twitter, and it was one of those guys that a lot of people in the sport knew. Maybe not the public knew of Craig, but a lot of people in the industry knew him because there's so many of those guys, Raj, that drive these guys, motor coaches and haulers, gets that stuff, gets that equipment to the track ready for these drivers. Oftentimes they're cooking meals for these guys. So there's a really close bond that you get to guys like that. So Craig is definitely one of those guys that's just, his death has also impacted a lot of people in the garage of NASCAR. And then there was also a father and son duo on board, Jack and Dennis Dutton, who were also on board. And it's just incredibly sad. So many lives lost in this tragedy, Raj. I still don't have the words, and I've had time to process it, but not. I mean, I don't know what to say about this. It reminds me of other tragedies the sport of NASCAR has seen in the past. Davey Allison, he passed away in the 90s. You had Alan Kulwicki that same year heading to Bristol Motor Speedway. In 2004, Hendrick Motorsports lost Ricky Hendrick, the son of Rick Hendrick, the owner, and many others who were on board a crash. And we've seen some drivers who had plane crashes that somehow survived. In 2019, Dale Earnhardt Jr. survived a plane crash of his family heading to Bristol Motor Speedway. The footage and images from that makes you wonder how they survived, and makes you wish that every story ended the way that the Earnhardt Jr. Crash did in 2019. But unfortunately, they don't all end the same way.
Well, Danny B., I thank you for your time, and God bless, my friend.
Thank you, Raj.